go ahead and take a look at our next example. We're given some information regarding sine of theta and cosine of theta, and one of the first things we want to do is draw our triangle and label it. So we're working with a right triangle. Directly across from our right angle is going to be our hypotenuse. And then we can go ahead and place theta inside of our triangle. I'm going to go ahead and label this angle as theta. So directly across from that is going to be our opposite side. Which means my last remaining side here is going to be the adjacent side. Now let's go back to the information they started us with. They gave us information about sine of theta, and they told us this was radical 10 over 10. And remember that sine of theta is the same thing as your opposite side over your hypotenuse. So what they've done here is they've already given us our side lengths. Our hypotenuse is going to be 10, and our opposite side is going to be radical 10. Now, normally we could go ahead and use Pythagorean theorem to get our third side of our triangle. However, in this example, they also gave us information about cosine of theta. And cosine of theta is 3 radical 10 over 10, which means they gave us information about our adjacent side and our hypotenuse. So I'm going to go ahead and label our adjacent side as 3 radical 10. Now let's go ahead and find the value of the other 4 remaining trig functions. Tangent of theta is the same thing as our opposite side over our adjacent side. Our opposite side was radical 10, and our adjacent side was 3 radical 10. Now, we want to make sure we go ahead and reduce our fractions. We also want to make sure we're rationalizing our denominators when it applies. So the radical 10, top and bottom, is going to cancel, and tangent of theta is going to give us 1/3. Now let's go ahead and do the other 3 trig functions. We have cosecant of theta. Keep in mind, this is the same thing as 1 over sine of theta, which really means we're taking our sine function up here and we're going to be flipping this fraction upside down. So we're going to have our hypotenuse on top and the opposite side on the bottom. So our hypotenuse is 10, and our opposite side is radical 10. Now, technically, this would be an okay answer. However, we want to make sure we rationalize our denominator, which means we do not want any square roots in the bottom part of our fraction. So in order to get rid of it, we're going to go ahead and multiply top and bottom by radical 10 over radical 10. That's going to give us 10 radical 10 on top. And keep in mind, when we multiply these denominators together, we're going to get radical 100, and the square root of 100 is just 10. So there's our denominator. And now we can go ahead and reduce where we can. The 10 on top and the 10 on the bottom will cancel, and we'll be left with radical 10. Our next trig function is going to be secant of theta. Remember, this is the same thing as 1 over cosine of theta. So we're going to be taking our cosine fraction, and we're going to be flipping this upside down, which means we're going to have the hypotenuse on top, which is 10. And we're going to have our adjacent side on the bottom, 3 radical 10. Now, again, we want to go ahead and rationalize our denominator. We want to get rid of that radical 10 in the bottom. Some students have asked me, do I have to multiply top and bottom by 3 radical 10? You can. You're just going to have one additional step to reduce. The only thing I really need to get rid of is the radical 10. So I'm going to go ahead and take this answer and multiply top and bottom just by the radical 10 over radical 10. That's going to give me 10 radical 10 on top. And remember when we did this part, we got the square root of 100, which was the same thing as 10. So 3 times 10 is going to give us 30. And now we can go ahead and reduce this fraction to get radical 10 on top and 3 on the bottom. And let's go ahead and do our last one, which is cotangent of theta. This is the same thing as 1 over tangent of theta. Or in this case, we're going to have our adjacent side on top, which is 3 radical 10. And we're going to have the opposite side on the bottom, which is radical 10. And then we can go ahead and reduce for a final answer of 3.